At the age of 28, I received Ji Wenjing's divorce application. At 18, he proposed to me with a ring made from chocolate wrapper. Just 10 years. The day of the divorce. He was in a car accident, and his memory reverted to when he was 18. That was when he loved me the most. When I received Ji Wenjing's divorce application, I was already at Los Angeles Airport in the US, preparing to fly to Paris. Holding the documents, I thought, we've finally come to this day. Ji Wenjing and I had already been separated for a full 2 years by then. Because he had his lawyer insist that I must return to the country to handle the matter. I cancelled my flight from Los Angeles to Paris and instead flew back home. On the plane, I looked at the wedding ring on my finger and remembered how, 10 years ago, he had cried like a child when he proposed. He said he would love me for a lifetime. Back then, I truly believed he would love me forever. But people change, don't they? 2 years ago, the last time I looked into his eyes, I knew he no longer loved me. Overthinking is futile. I closed my eyes, letting the darkness consume all my thoughts. Only when I truly stood on the soil of my homeland did I understand the meaning of the nearer home, the more timid one feels. 2 years is neither long nor short, yet enough to make everything unfamiliar. Ruobao. Over here. A familiar voice called out to me from the crowd. It was Fang Rong. She had been my closest friend since high school. When I returned to the country and Ji Wenjing agreed to the divorce, she was the first person I told. She wore a beige suit, with wavy red lips and large, exaggerated metal hoop earrings, looking incredibly dashing. Give me a kiss, my treasure. She pulled me into a tight embrace and planted a firm kiss on me. I was both amused and exasperated. Just as I was about to turn my head to tease her, she cupped my face and turned it away. Sweetheart, don't look, it's something filthy. I smiled faintly and shook my head slightly. How could I possibly not see Ji Wenjing? The entire airport was covered in his various advertising campaigns. Yes. My husband is a superstar. Ruobao, just you wait. I'll be your divorce lawyer. Ji Wenjing, that bastard, has been secretly married for so many years and entangled with that so-and-so lie. With just the paparazzi photos, I can make sure he's skinned alive even if he doesn't die. Fang Rong was already one of the partners at a renowned law firm in the country. Watching her righteous indignation, I suddenly remembered she was originally Ji Wenjing's friend. Even though I've lost Ji Wenjing, at least I still have her. My dear lawyer Fang, no need to trouble yourself with such a trivial matter. I just want to get this over with. You're not planning to walk away with nothing, are you? Fang Rong took one look at my silent expression and immediately guessed my answer. You. I've never seen anyone as foolish as you. At 18, you also gave up on going to Paris. 18 years old. Such a distant past. I never want to remember. Rong, I don't want to entangle with him any further. I've exhausted all my strength in the 10 years I spent with him. Fang Rong didn't say anything more, just took me to her apartment. Get some rest. I'll head back to the law firm to take care of some things. Once again, I was left alone in the vast apartment, just like countless times in that house in Jiangbei, always just me by myself. I turned on the TV, and an entertainment news segment was playing. Breaking news. Is famous actress Fan Lai about to have good news? Rumors have long swirled about her years-long romance with Ji Wenjing, and now sweet recent photos of the two vacationing in Hawaii have surfaced, sparking speculation they might be scouting wedding venues. When questioned by reporters, Fan Lai didn't give a direct answer, but the smile she couldn't hide hinted at happiness. Currently, Fan Lai is preparing to attend the Cannes Film Festival, and all questions will have to wait until her return for confirmation. Hearing all this, I felt no ripple of emotion inside me. 2 years ago, if I had seen or heard the name Fan Lai on TV, I would have screamed and smashed the television. I truly admire myself right now. A strange text message suddenly appeared on my phone. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., Civil Affairs Bureau. Efficiency. So the reason you couldn't wait to divorce me was to marry Fan Lai. Perhaps I should even thank her. The next day, at 9 in the morning, I arrived at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau as agreed. I waited for nearly 2 hours, but no one showed up. I mustered up my courage and was about to dial that number. Suddenly, Fang Rong's call came through. Ruo Ruo, come to the First People's Hospital quickly. Ji Wenjing has been in a car accident. We got married. Never did I expect that the first thing Ji Wenjing would say to me after 2 years apart would be these words. Everyone in the ward turned to look at me, some with wariness, others with concern. He glanced at the ring on my finger, scratched his head, and looked adorably clueless. What's going on? I glanced up at Fang Rong. His memories have reverted to when he was 18. Fang Rong said to me in the cubicle. Due to a severe blow to the head, the doctor said his memory is impaired, he only remembers things from before he turned 18. 18 years old? I muttered to myself. Why? Why did it have to be this year? Because this was the year I gave up the chance to study at the Royal Dance Academy in Paris. Because this year, I severed ties with my parents over Ji Wenjing. Because this year marked the beginning of the decade-long hell that would become my life. I don't want to remember anymore. I rushed into the hospital room. I've already divorced you. I could never divorce her, marrying her is my dream. The two voices clashed simultaneously. I froze, and Ji Wenjing froze too. Only his agent was left with that punchable I told you so look. You're lying to me, aren't you? There's no amnesia at all, is there? You're just pranking me, right? This isn't funny at all, I'm going to train. He made a move to get off the hospital bed but was stopped by his agent. No one is deceiving you, Ji Wenjing. Take a good look. What is this? I pulled the marriage certificate from my bag, flung it in front of him, and said word by word. I don't care about any memory loss or not. Today is the day I divorce you, and no matter what, I will divorce you. Ji Wenjing looked at the marriage certificate I threw over, smiled at first, but after hearing my words, his face instantly turned pale. Ruo Ruo, you. Yes, Wenjing. Didn't you just go to Hawaii with Miss Fan a few days ago to look at wedding venues? The agent quickly chimed in. Shut up, he roared. A sudden surge of anger rose within me, and I rushed over to pull him up. Let's go. We're getting a divorce at the Civil Affairs Bureau. Ji Wenjing refused, but I dragged him along, oblivious to his increasingly pale face. My head hurts so much. Suddenly, he clutched his head in pain, then collapsed unconscious. After the doctor finished examining him, he scolded everyone harshly. The patient suffers from severe depression and has been in a car accident. Are you trying to push him into another mental breakdown by provoking him like this? Depression. Since when did Ji Wenjing have depression? Don't mention divorce in front of him, at least not during this period of amnesia. This is only temporary amnesia. Once all his symptoms stabilize, he will remember everything. Until then, whatever you wish to do, please be patient and wait for the patient's recovery. Especially you, Mrs. G, the patient needs you now. The doctor's meaning was clear. But this meant I had to stay by Ji Wenjing's side. I didn't want to. I gazed at Ji Wenjing in his deep slumber, my heart overwhelmed with sorrow and despair. Why did you have to go back to being 18? 18 was the age when you loved me the most. Ji Wenjing and I first met at Jiangbei No. 1 High School. In the second semester of my first year of high school, I transferred to Jiangbei No. 1 High School and was assigned to sit next to him. Jiangbei No. 1 High School is the most prestigious high school in the entire Jiangbei city. My parents hoped I would achieve excellent grades in domestic high school to strengthen my application to the Royal Dance Academy of Paris. I've always been an obedient child, never defiant. But after all, Jiangbei No. 1 High School was primarily focused on college entrance exams, so they weren't particularly welcoming to a transfer student like me. So on my first day, I was assigned the very last seat. My deskmate was an empty seat. Everyone in the class was too busy grinding through practice problems to spare a word for me. I had always been like an invisible person, until 2 months later when Ji Wenjing came to school. I was sleeping when he arrived. Back then, I practiced ballet very diligently, often until the early hours of the morning. So I was always sleep-deprived during the day. When I woke up, there wasn't a single person left in the classroom. A sudden wave of cold sweat broke out all over my body. Ah, hello there, Deskmate. A pleasant voice sounded above my head. That was the first time I met Ji Wenjing. He was tall, dressed in a white tracksuit, exuding a youthful energy unlike anyone else. His face was handsome, with a straight nose and natural-born looker. But at that time, I had no mind to look at him. What class is it now? Probably PE. Oh heavens. It's Demon Lee's PE class. For being late, I was punished with 5 laps around the field. Ji Wenjing also came, and he was punished with running 10 laps. I protested, why are the number of laps we're being punished with different? Devil Lee looked at me somewhat disdainfully and said, "You're a girl, can you even run?" I detest this kind of disdainful look the most. Yes. Then you run 10 laps too. I started running alone, and all the students active on the playground turned to look. Ji Wenjing followed shortly after. Deskmate, don't push yourself too hard, he teased with a smirk. I ignored him. 1 lap, 2 laps, 5 laps, 7 laps, 9 laps. I gradually felt my breathing become erratic, my lungs about to burst. Find the rhythm, tap tap tap, tap tap tap. A voice sounded behind me. I glanced at him. What kind of person is this? How can they run 10 laps without even breaking a sweat? But his rhythmic tapping sounds just like the beat of my dance. I quickly regained control of my breathing rhythm. Finished 10 laps smoothly. Devil Lee was somewhat surprised by my performance and promptly declared that from then on, anyone late regardless of gender would have to run 5 extra laps. Only then did I realize that the original punishment was just 5 laps, and Ji Wenjing had to run 10 merely because he was a sports scholarship student. This was it, I was even more unpopular now. But to my surprise, when I returned to the classroom, some girls actually came up to talk to me, expressing their admiration for my furious 10-lap run. Because Devil Lee always looked down on girls. She handed me a bottle of strawberry milk. But it was taken by a pair of large hands. Thank you, political studies class representative. Ji Wenjing, are you trying to get yourself killed? That's not for you. It's for your deskmate. Oh. Ji Wenjing glanced at the half-drunk milk and said to me, "Then I'll treat you next time." The girl rolled her eyes at him and smiled at me. "My name is Fang Rong. My name is Tu Ruo." Just as Fang Rong and I hit it off instantly, an affected voice chimed in. "My name is Ji Wenjing." Fang Rong couldn't take it anymore and jumped up to hit Ji Wenjing. They were frolicking behind me, yet I felt a joy I'd never known before. I was no longer alone at last. After that, it began like the opening of many cliché romance novels. Ji Wenjing and I fell in love. He accompanied me as I danced in the early morning practice room, and I joined him in the pool for his training. We made a pact, one to become the world's finest ballet dancer, bringing fame to China, and the other to become the best gold medalist, competing in the Olympics to win glory for our country. Yet, in the end, we did not follow the path to happiness as in a romantic love story. At the age of 18, Ji Wenjing was on his way to watch my CHD ballet championship when he got into a car accident, suffering a severe fracture in his right leg. Even walking again became a challenge, let alone swimming. Yet it was in that competition where I truly shone, securing early admission to the Paris Royal Ballet Academy. But in the end, I gave up the chance to go to Paris. Because that year, at the age of 18, Ji Wenjing, lying in a hospital bed, proposed to me with a ring made from a chocolate wrapper. Shouldn't love mean standing by each other through thick and thin? That's what I thought when I was 18. At 28, I sat by the hospital bed, looking at Ji Wenjing's face. He hadn't even changed much from when he was 18. The only thing that had changed was that his heart no longer loved me. I'm a little afraid he might wake up. I'm very familiar with the 28-year-old Ji Wenjing. But I can hardly remember the 18-year-old Ji Wenjing anymore. Gradually feeling drowsy, I leaned on the bedside and fell asleep. When I woke up, Ji Wenjing had been awake for a while, holding my hand and studying it intently. "I don't know how to break this deadlock. We got married." He said it again. This time with certainty. He seemed to have completely forgotten the fact that we were in a heated argument just 2 hours ago. "Look at this ring on your hand, it has a running circle design. This must be the one I made for you. I was somewhat surprised, pulling my hand away from his to carefully examine the patterns on the ring I was wearing. I always thought these were marks left from hand polishing. I wanted to make it for you last year, but training kept me too busy.
Last year? You mean when we were 17?
But this ring was just a random wedding band Ji Wenjing picked out when he was 22, wasn't it? Back then, I even complained that this ring didn't even have a diamond. It wasn't something you could wear out. They say I'm a big star now, but I don't believe it. But when they say you're my wife, I believe that. His tone carried the unique lightness of youth, making me smile involuntarily. Hey, you finally smiled at me. You didn't smile when you saw me today, but you used to smile at me every day. I was momentarily stunned. Did I really smile at Ji Wenjing so often before? I don't remember. I'm so hungry. Honey, let's go down to eat. It took me a while to realize Ji Wenjing was calling me. He naturally took my hand and smiled at me. Let's order takeout. Right now, it's not convenient for you to go out. Ji Wenjing truly lived up to his status as a top celebrity. He had just been admitted to the hospital in the morning, and by afternoon, the news was already out. Now, his fans were clamoring to see him outside the hospital. Trapped in the room for several days in a row. From his initial outburst to gradually accepting the fact that he was a popular star, Ji Wenjing went through quite the transformation. They would gradually start searching for their own name online. One day, he was busy taking a selfie holding his ID card by himself. I was surprised and asked him what he was doing. These media outlets are writing nonsense. I'm going to report them. I glanced at the headline, actress Fan Lijia's wedding is approaching, spending the rest of her life with superstar Ji Wenjing. I looked at him but didn't stop him. He was a bit huffy, his cheeks puffed out. This was very unlike him. It dawned on me belatedly that this was the kind of expression the 18-year-old Ji Wenjing would make. Okay. Success. He looked as if he had accomplished a great feat, brimming with pride. Stop writing nonsense, I already have a wife. My wife is the best in the world. He beamed at me with a smile. But I didn't want to look into his eyes. After a period of observation in the hospital, Ji Wenjing was told he could go home to recuperate. Yet his memory remained frozen at the age of 18. I was anxious about when he would regain his memory, only to receive the doctor's indifferent reply. His vital signs are all within normal range. The reason he hasn't regained his memory yet might be psychological. You need to keep him in a happy mood every day. I remained silent. The discharge arrangements originally made by his agent were firmly rejected by Ji Wenjing. Right now, he only trusts me. I took him back to our home in Jiangbei. As soon as he stepped inside, Ji Wenjing said he didn't like this place, it made him sad. He wore me down until I had no temper left. I retorted. Then where do you want to go? To Moon Island, let's go to Moon Island. Didn't you always say you wanted to visit my hometown? Here, we can't go anywhere, but there, no one knows us. I had always wanted to visit Ji Wenjing's hometown, but before, Ji Wenjing was always too busy to take me there. Reason told me I should refuse his request, but the words that came out of my mouth had already made the choice for me. Okay. I comforted myself with the doctor's words. He needed to stay in good spirits to recover his memory as soon as possible. Ji Wenjing had bought a small seaside villa on Moon Island at some point. And it had always been well taken care of. A white picket fence, blue eaves, and bright yellow window screens. This is how I've always imagined my dream beach house would look. Moon Island lies to the south of Jiangbei, a solitary isle where the young have steadily left for work elsewhere, leaving behind a mostly elderly population. The only means of transportation is a ferry that comes once every 3 days. When Ji Wenjing and I arrived, dusk was falling, and not a soul was in sight along the shore. We moved into the beach house. The sea breeze fluttered the sheer curtains, carrying the scent of ocean waves. After a long day of travel, our stomachs were growling with hunger. When the steaming bowl of instant noodles was placed before me, I nearly cried. I had almost forgotten Ji Wenjing could cook. Back when we had no money, I would hustle commercial gigs during the day and wash dishes at night. Every time I came home, I'd find Ji Wenjing sitting at the dining table, waiting to have dinner together. We couldn't afford meat, so most of the time it was just a bowl of instant noodles and a golden fried egg. Ji Wenjing couldn't bear to eat the egg himself and always saved it for me. But those days didn't last long. After Ji Wenjing could walk again, he started modeling, entered the entertainment industry, began acting, and gradually became more and more famous. We are becoming more and more wealthy. The person who cooks at home has also become me. But the food I make, he doesn't like to eat. He no longer cares whether I eat well or not, because he will never eat with me again. Be careful, it's hot. He blew on it for me a few times. Tears fell into the instant noodles, but I didn't dare to look up. I could only keep my head down and eat furiously. Ji Wenjing thought I loved his cooking, and his mood lifted with delight as he chuckled. Slow down, little greedy cat. Tomorrow, I'll make seafood for you. Little greedy cat was the nickname he gave me back in high school. Back then, I was learning ballet and had to control my weight, so every meal was a miserable affair. Ji Wenjing, however, had a huge daily training load and always ate a lot. So whenever I accompanied him for meals, I would always gaze at him pitifully. Just like a little greedy cat. After the meal, we took a walk by the sea, and he suddenly asked, "Why did you stop dancing ballet? You could have been the best ballet dancer." My face turned deathly pale in an instant. 6 years ago, after seeing Ji Wenjing's dazzling rise to stardom, I had tried dancing ballet again. But 4 years is enough to rust a ballerina's toes. I exerted all my strength, yet could only achieve a third of what I once could. And because I practiced day and night, my first child with Ji Wenjing was lost before even reaching 3 months. I will always remember the words he said to me when I came out of the hospital room. "Tu Ruo, in this lifetime, don't you dare dream of becoming the best ballerina." Those words broke my heart. I'm tired. I turned right back around. Until I saw there was only one made bed in the room. Fortunately, 18-year-old Ji Wenjing was still an innocent young man. He blushed and took the initiative to say, "You sleep here, I'll go to the sofa in the living room." For several days in a row, Ji Wenjing cooked different dishes for me. We spent our days wandering around the island. Ji Wenjing introduced me to his hometown. For example, the grandmother who just walked past us was the owner of the only small shop on the island when he was a child, and she was the most admired figure in their childhood. Another example is Moonlight Island's Perfume Bay, where the fish and shrimp are the plumpest, and he used to spend entire days there as a child. He also mentioned his mother for the first time, a pitiable woman. Because she was trafficked to this island and sold to a father with mental illness. When he was 7 years old, the police found him and took him away forever. Do you know how I learned to swim? I shook my head. Ji Wenjing pointed to a broken wall by the sea and said, "My father had mental illness, didn't he? After my mother left, no one could control him. When he had episodes, he would beat me to death. I thought, if I jumped from there and died, it would be better. But I didn't die. Instead, I learned how to swim. After that, whenever my father had an episode, I would escape to the sea and swim until my father came back to his senses and called me home from the shore. But maybe I should thank my father. If it weren't for him making me learn to swim, I might not have been noticed by the coach." A smile graced his face, yet tears welled in his eyes. Ji Wenjing had never mentioned any of this to me before. I looked at him in stunned silence. All this time, beneath that mask of feigned strength, how much pain had he endured alone? "Ruoruo, why do you want a divorce from me? I could never initiate a divorce with you, I love you so much. Is it possible that, like my father, there's something wrong up here too?" He pointed to his own head. I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh and shook my head. How do I tell the 18-year-old Ji Wenjing that the 28-year-old him no longer loves me? Perhaps, once you remember everything, you'll find the answer. Then I don't want to remember. If it means losing you, I'd rather not have those 10 years of memories. He was pouting again. I resisted the urge to pinch his cheeks. How come I never noticed before how adorable Ji Wenjing was at 18? But Ji Wenjing, by the time you turn 28, you won't be afraid of losing me. The first one to lose patience was Ji Wenjing's manager. Fearing I had ulterior motives, he personally came to Moon Island, bringing along a commemorative photo album of Ji Wenjing's 10-year debut, dozens of magazines, and a whopping 267 gigabytes of shooting materials, intending for Ji Wenjing to review. But Ji Wenjing dismissed him with just a few words. He had no intention of looking through these materials. He preferred strolling around the island and chatting with the fishermen instead. Yet these materials caught my attention, even though I had been with Ji Wenjing for the past 10 years. But he never spoke a word about his work. I opened the photo album, and the first thing that caught my eye was Ji Wenjing's modeling photo, his youthful face so tender it seemed you could squeeze water from it. Then came the photo from his first extra role. Oh, he was playing a general. Flipping further, there were his first lead role, his first newcomer award, his first interview with CCTV, his first Best Actor win. I was thoroughly engrossed, and after finishing the photo album and magazines, I started watching the videos. Just some records from filming the show. I opened that little transparent folder. The filming equipment back then was so poor, all you could see was a blurry image. Suddenly, his voice rang out. "This is the meal my wife made for me, her first time cooking. Here, bring the camera closer, get a good shot. Let me take a bite." Yuck. What followed was a long silence. "Are you still filming? Cut it out, cut it out." After composing himself, he gave a thumbs up to the camera. "Honey, you're amazing. This is so delicious." Ah. At this moment, Ji Wenjing still loved me. So when was it that he stopped loving me? I began frantically searching through these videos for the line between his love and indifference. Finally, in a folder titled Symbiosis, I found a faint clue. This drama was the breakout hit that skyrocketed Ji Wenjing to fame, earning him numerous awards, and was rumored to be the show where he and Fan Lai fell in love. Due to the immense popularity of this drama at the time, all social media platforms and video sites were flooded and dominated by fans shipping Ji Wenjing and Fan Lai. So much so that I utterly detest this series. In the promotional materials for this series, I saw a Ji Wenjing unlike any version before: cold, formidable, temperamental, unsmiling, yet exuding an alluring aura of authority, much like the powerful alternate personality X in the show. But only when looking at Fan Lai did his eyes hold the familiar warmth of love. Found it. So it was from this moment on that you stopped loving me. That was exactly the time when I was pregnant. My stomach churned, and the only thought in my mind was that I never wanted to stay with Ji Wenjing again. I must divorce him. I called Ji Wenjing back into the room, forcing him to look at these materials and to keep recalling. The more he resisted, the harder I pushed. Finally, he swept all the materials aside and ran out alone. He didn't return until evening. I began to worry. Go out and look for him. The old men playing chess at the village school had long since left, and Ji Wenjing wasn't there either. He wasn't at Xiangshui Bay catching fish and shrimp either. I panicked and started asking everyone I met. Finally, I learned from a fisherman that Ji Wenjing had gone to the seaside. "This young man knows how to take care of people, diving into the sea every day to catch seafood for you," the fisherman said cheerfully. The sunset by the sea burned like fire. The sea was vast and calm, serene and deep, as if everything could be devoured. I anxiously called his name from the shore. No one answered me. Remembering his injured right leg, I was terrified and burst into tears on the spot. "Darling." Suddenly, a figure leaped out from the sea. He waved at me cheerfully, something gleaming in his hand. The waves pushed him back and forth, now distant, now near. I was terrified he would vanish from my sight just like that. Slowly, he swam towards me, a smug smile on his face. I wiped my tears and turned to leave without a word. He hurried after me from behind. The dampness and warmth from his body clung to me tightly, just like on the playground that day. "Honey, wait for me." He grabbed my hand. I shook him off with a jerk. He grabbed my hand again. I shook it off once more. Left with no choice, he pulled me close and locked me in his embrace. Listening to the pounding of his heart against his chest, I finally couldn't hold back my breakdown. "Do you have any idea how dangerous it is for you to go into the sea? Don't you know your leg is injured?" He froze in shock, and I shoved him aside before running into the room and locking the door behind me. No matter how much he called for me outside the door, I refused to answer. Honey, my leg healed a long time ago, don't worry. The seafood we eat every day is what I catch fresh each morning. Catch it fresh. It's just that I don't seem to be able to swim as well as I used to. Of course. Have you forgotten how painful the rehabilitation training was back then? This afternoon, I remembered some things. My heart skipped a beat. Back then, was I involved in a serious car accident? Is that why I gave up swimming? Not being able to swim as a competitor anymore is so painful. I loved it so much. Rehabilitation training is so painful, so painful. I remember back then, when I hadn't yet decided to give up on going to Paris, my parents kept a close eye on my studies, and I had to attend 3 French classes in the evening. Only at night could I sneak out and come to the hospital secretly to see him. Every time, he was already asleep. Looking at his pale, parched lips and his face that had become so thin it was almost unrecognizable, I couldn't help but burst into tears. But I'm afraid of waking him up, the nurse said, because only when he's asleep does he not feel the pain. The nurse also said that among all the patients, he was the one who tried the hardest and endured the most suffering. Even she couldn't understand how an 18-year-old boy could be so resilient. Ji Wenjing's voice came through again. But I thought, I must stand up, or how else can I go to Paris to see you dance? His voice suddenly trembled. But, you fool, how could you give up ballet because of me? Don't you know, compared to me not being able to swim, my heart aches even more that you no longer dance ballet. I'd rather have died in that car accident myself. How could the heavens take away both of our dreams? Ji Wenjing had never said these words to me before. During every rehabilitation session, he never cried out in pain, always laughing and joking instead. When he found out he could no longer swim, he just smiled and said it was no big deal. When I told him I was giving up ballet, he just silently held me in his arms. But now, listening to him say it hurts so much, that he's in agony and feels like he's dying. Only then did I realize that 18-year-old me had never truly tried to understand his pain. You can't swim anymore, but didn't I give up ballet too? I cut ties with my parents for you, working day and night. Why won't you pull yourself together? Was that my fault? Why does everyone blame me? It's so humiliating, dancing every day in the mall for people who don't understand ballet. I'm exhausted. These words have been festering wildly in the dark corners of my heart. Even if it wasn't said out loud, Ji Wenjing must have felt it at that time. I was sobbing uncontrollably in the room. I'm a bad person, aren't I? Otherwise, you wouldn't have wanted to divorce me, wouldn't be ignoring me like this. I bit my arm, tears streaming down like rain. No, it's not. I ignored him. It was because, the moment he jumped into the sea, my heart stopped. It was the terror of staring at the vast ocean and not being able to find him. It's the powerlessness of watching his back walk away countless times over these 10 years. It's the longing for those loving eyes to only ever look at me in this moment. It's expressing the hope for his memory to return, yet deep down praying that day never comes. It's the pain of realizing that even now, I still love him. I opened the door. I hugged Ji Wenjing, who was in tears. I asked him, "Do you love me?" "I love you." If this is a heaven-sent moment, then perhaps I shouldn't have squandered the 18-year-old Ji Wenjing. In that case, why not cherish him at this very moment? Isn't what I long for just these loving eyes gazing at me when I was 18? Looking into his smiling eyes, I was utterly immersed in this ocean of love. We kissed each other wildly, as if trying to meld into one another's bodies. In the morning, I awoke to Ji Wenjing's tender kisses. I made up my mind that no matter what lay ahead, during this time, I would return to being the 18-year-old Tu Ruo. We began kissing each other every day, embracing each other, cooking together, taking walks by the sea, and watching the sunset together. This was the married life that the 18-year-old Tu Ruo had fantasized about. On the island, days passed without notice of seasons, until one morning, we were abruptly awakened by a flurry of urgent drumbeats. Ji Wenjing excitedly told me that today is the Hinyo festival on the island. The islanders are inviting the Hinyo to leave the temple and patrol the sea. Those who witness the Hinyo patrolling the sea will receive their blessings. He grabbed my hand and pulled me outside. The Sea Maidens Festival would last the entire day, traditionally making it the liveliest occasion on Moon Island. But this year, due to the typhoon, ferry services were suspended, leaving the festival rather sparsely attended. Yet this did nothing to diminish the islanders' reverence and affection for the Sea Maidens. As the only young couple on the island, we naturally received extra attention. The village elders held a special blessing ceremony for us, adorning us with fragrant flowers and anointing our foreheads with oil. Murmuring prayers, they wished for the goddess to bless us, that lovers might finally be united. When night fell, a small gathering was held on the island. Most of the islanders were elderly, but under the influence of festivals and alcohol, they began to liven up. They started boasting about how much effort they had put into finding a mermaid stone in the Devil's Cave of the sea to win their current wives. And their women, upon hearing this, hid more pride than shyness behind their blushing expressions. I've heard the legend of the Sea Woman Stone. It is said that in ancient times, the Sea Woman and her husband were deeply in love. One day, her husband went out to sea to fish but never returned. The Sea Woman waited by the shore day after day, weeping and praying to the heavens to bring her husband home. Her sincerity moved the sea deity. The deity transformed her tears into fluorite, illuminating the sea, guiding her husband lost in the storm step by step back home. Thus, the mermaid stone became a symbol of steadfast love. If a man is willing to give the mermaid stone to a woman, it signifies his readiness to entrust his life into her hands. Little girl, did your man give you any mermaid stones? I shook my head. Tell your man to buy you one. These mermaid stones are much easier to get now than in our days. There are professional teams coming to collect them every year. How can a bought one compare to finding it yourself by diving? Those things are only found in the Devil's Cave. Don't give such reckless advice. I remained silent, glancing at Ji Wenjing beside me. Suddenly, I remembered how Fan Lai had once posted a picture of the mermaid stone on social media during the Chishi festival a few years back. Just a worthless piece of rock, I don't even want it. I muttered under my breath, lowering my head. Ji Wenjing's disappointed expression went unnoticed. But in the end, I got drunk and stubbornly refused to go home with Ji Wenjing, insisting on staying at the beach. There was no other way, he had to carry me home on his back. Ji Wenjing, you didn't give me a mermaid stone, you don't love me, I shouted on his back. I want the mermaid stone, I want the mermaid stone, I want the mermaid stone. Suddenly, his entire body trembled. I was completely baffled. Tilting my head down, I realized he was actually smiling. What the hell are you smiling at? He set me down. Told me to close my eyes. I closed my eyes in a daze. 1, 2, 3. A teardrop-shaped fluorite lay in his palm. I was stunned. I almost thought I wouldn't be able to give it away. He let out a light chuckle. I picked up the glowing amber stone. I put in a lot of effort to find this that afternoon. The moonlight was bright, casting a shimmering glow on the sea. I gazed at his crescent moon-like eyes and brows. Make a wish. The mermaid stone grants wishes with great power. I picked up the mermaid stone and silently made a wish to the sea. Oh beautiful and kind sea maiden, please protect us. Let's run away together until we're 18. Don't let the memories find you. But the sea maiden clearly did not hear my prayer. In the days that followed, Ji Wenjing began to undergo subtle changes. He started experiencing severe headaches from time to time. Sometimes he would disappear to who knows where, leaving me to search for him all day. One day, a storm arose at sea. I searched everywhere for him but couldn't find him, crying my eyes out in desperation. In the end, I discovered he had fallen asleep in a solitary grave by the sea. Sometimes he would suddenly wake up at night, drenched in sweat. His eyes were filled with terror as he looked at me. Startled by him, I quickly asked what was wrong. He remained silent, only saying he had a nightmare. But most of the time, he was still that 18-year-old Ji Wenjing who loved me. Until one night, he suddenly grabbed me by the neck. His eyes were filled with unfamiliar hatred. He said in a low voice, "Die, only when you die will he die." I was choked to the point of speechlessness, only able to desperately slap at his hand. Just when I thought I was going to die, Suddenly, the pressure around my neck loosened. Ji Wenjing stared at his own hands in disbelief. My throat was too choked to speak, so I could only hold him and pat his back. Warm tears fell onto the nape of my neck. That night, Ji Wenjing never slept again. The next day, we left the beach house and returned to Jiangbei. Sudden aggressive behavior may be due to confusion during memory recovery, and the patient had been taking psychiatric medications before. The recent discontinuation of these drugs might also have some effect. I suspect the patient must have suffered some severe trauma before the injury, which is why he has been strongly resisting recovering his memories all this time, leading to his current mental confusion. If this continues, he might have a breakdown. During this period, you must keep a close eye on his behavior at all times. Do not let him out of your sight for even a moment. Ji Wenjing grew increasingly silent. One day, before heading to the hospital, he suddenly asked, "What if I recover my memories and forget about you? How could you forget me?" I smiled. "What if I really forgot you?" He looked very worried. "Is this why you're unwilling to remember? Then I'll pester you every day until you remember me." Suddenly, he felt happy. "You better keep your word." I raised my hand as if taking an oath. "I promise." Ji Wenjing's treatment wasn't going smoothly. Due to his status, I couldn't accompany him to his sessions, and could only watch as his smiles grew fewer each day. Sometimes in the middle of the night, he would scream in the next room. By the time I rushed in, I'd find him curled up in pain. I held him, gently soothing him. "It will pass, it will pass." Slowly, I too began to grow haggard. One night, I was suddenly startled awake by the sound of a ringing. I picked up the phone to hear urgent French on the other end. "Führer, thank God, you've been selected. It's nothing short of a miracle. The originally chosen actress accidentally sprained her ankle, and now the Royal Theatre is desperately searching for a new lead dancer. I sent them your video, and they're willing to give you a chance. Fiona, God has heard our prayers. Come on, you must come to Paris. They're only giving you a week." Oh my God. I nearly jumped up, tears streaming down my face in an instant. After failing the Royal Theatre audition, I had originally planned to fly to Paris to unwind and watch some performances. I'm sorry, Susan. I looked at Ji Wenjing, who had finally managed to fall asleep. I can't go. Fiona, did I hear that right? Are you out of your mind? Have you forgotten how you blistered your toes for this opportunity? Have you forgotten how many times you danced until you fainted, until you broke down, how much suffering you endured for this? Tears streamed down my face like rain. Susan, I'm sorry. I couldn't bear to listen any longer and hung up the phone. Ji Wenjing had woken up at some point and was quietly watching me. Why are you crying? I'm not. The wind was too strong, it got in my eyes. In the days that followed, I was consumed by an unprecedented restlessness. In my dreams, I'm always dancing ballet. Ji Wenjing was smiling at me from the audience. I danced and danced. Suddenly, Ji Wenjing was gone. I was the only one left on the entire stage. I waited almost despairingly for the week to pass quickly. But unexpectedly, something even more despairing happened. Fan Lai returned to the country. She brought back all of Ji Wenjing's memories. What I couldn't do, she accomplished once again. Ji Wenjing reverted to the 28-year-old Ji Wenjing, his eyes once again filled with indifference. I can't bear this blow. Our relationship had returned to its icy state before he went abroad, until finally he lost his patience and asked me, "What will it take for you to agree to a divorce? Come with me to Moon Island one more time." Deep down, I harbored a faint hope that we could relive those joyful moments once again. All the way, I kept talking about the fun times we had back then. He was cold and impatient. By sunset, I found myself frozen at the seaside. "Do you still remember this?" I took out that amber stone. That night, we carved our names together on the stone, praying that the amber would bless us with a long and unbroken union. "Do you still remember the wish you made? Do you remember?" I haven't lost my memory. Tears streamed uncontrollably from my eyes. The old me would have thought this version of myself was weak. But now, I only feel my own bravery. I admit that I loved Ji Wenjing, and I admit that he hurt me. But tears are not a sign of weakness. They are proof that I loved him. I smiled faintly, then threw the heavy stone back into the sea and turned to look at him. Ji Wenjing, I agree to the divorce. The ferry from the island was slow, but Ji Wenjing seemed unwilling to spend another moment with me, so he had his agent pick him up by yacht. I watched slowly as he gradually disappeared over the sea. As the ferry departed Moon Island, the setting sun cast golden ripples across the sea. I seemed to see the 18-year-old Ji Wenjing waving at me with a smile from the water. Suddenly, I shouted toward the sea, laughing through my tears. Ji Wenjing. Ji Wenjing. Goodbye. Goodbye. On the day of processing the divorce certificate, Ji Wenjing did not show up. I don't know what method he used, but in the end, we still managed to complete the divorce procedures. I flew to Paris, devoting myself wholeheartedly to preparing for the performance. In September, my performance of Gazelle resounded through Paris. The media hailed me as an ethereal spirit from the East, dancing Gazelle with heartrending beauty. Amidst all the glory, my heart, like Gazelle's, had died forever. The following year, Ji Wenjing announced his retirement from the entertainment industry due to a concealed marriage scandal. I never heard his name mentioned again. Later on, I kept dancing, all the way until I was 42, and my story inspired many people. At the age of 36, I married a Frenchman, and we had 3 children, an older brother and a pair of twin sisters, who were absolutely adorable. My second husband loved me dearly, and I lived a very happy life. At the age of 45, the Royal Theatre of France held a special honorary ceremony for me. Once again, I performed Gazelle. I took my final bow amidst thunderous applause. I had finally realized my dream of becoming a world-renowned Chinese ballet dancer. In the days when I no longer danced, I lived quite leisurely, tending to the garden and taking walks with my husband and children. One day, I received a letter from the United States. It was written by a man named William. I remembered that name every time I performed. He would present me with a basket of flowers. So I opened the letter. Dear Ms. Tu Ruo, congratulations on your successful performance. On behalf of the wonderful Mr. Ji, I extend my sincerest wishes to you. Please forgive my presumption in writing to you. After much deliberation, I have decided to tell you everything about Mr. Ji, even though I promised him to keep it a secret forever. Your friend Mr. Ji passed away 10 years ago at the Redwood Psychiatric Hospital in San Francisco. During his lifetime, he suffered from severe dissociative identity disorder and fought bravely against it until his last moments. Both the medical staff and I were deeply moved by his courageous and resilient spirit. He told us that his beloved was a beautiful Chinese ballet dancer. I watched your curtain call performance, and you are still as beautiful as ever. He will share with us every report of your performances. He eagerly looks forward to the day he recovers, to meet you again. But even as an experienced psychiatrist, I know his chances of full recovery are slim. I do not know what terrible past lies within this kind and gentle young man. In the repeated memory regression experiments, I've seen all kinds of versions of him. Among those painful and desperate memories, only the fragments related to you allow me to find the real him. This makes me immensely grateful for your existence. This is a pitiful young man whose brief life was only joyful during the days he spent with you. He was deeply tormented for having hurt you. Please allow me to plead his case. Within him resides a personality known as X. He is a powerful, ruthless, and cold personality, constantly seeking to consume Mr. G's dominant self. Most of the things that hurt you were deliberately done by X, because it would cause Mr. G pain. Before the car accident when Mr. G was 28, he had already been encroaching on the host personality for a long time. It wasn't until after the car accident that Mr. G met you again. It was you who awakened him. But X's personality was simply too overpowering, and Mr. G feared it would harm you, so he chose to leave. Believe me, it was no different from killing him. Every day he spent away from you, he lived in excruciating pain. He died of heart failure. Years of medication had severely damaged his body and dulled his mind. In his final days, he had become like a child, unable to remember anything. Just before leaving, He suddenly regained clarity and told me he was Ji Wenjing, 18 years old. He wanted to take his girlfriend to Moon Island. He passed away without any pain. I can assure you that in the time of his 18th year, he was happy because of your presence. Once again, I apologize for this letter. It is not my intention to disturb your life, but only to let you know the truth of that time, so you may not hold resentment against this poor soul. If you have time, you may visit him at the Notre Dame Church next to the Royal Theatre in France. Inside lies his ashes, along with a teardrop-shaped stone he held tightly until his last breath. May God bless you.